Thank you very much for the introduction. It's a long way, and when I heard this, I think that I have more past than future. But anyway, let's go. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, I would like to thank the OFC organization for the kind invitation and to say that it's an honor to be part of this important meeting. I'd like also to thank the opportunity to talk about the Brazilian National Broadband Program, which is known as PNBL, and of course, about the Telebras history. It's a short history, but a lot of adventures. Access to information plays a key role in economic and social development, and it's an important tool to help to end the social inequalities among men. With this in mind, the Brazilian government saw the need to reactivate Telebras in order to increase competitiveness in the broadband sector. And the reason was the big problems, the big gap that we have in digital inclusion in the country, especially in areas where the broadband offer is non-existent or too small. So having said that, today I will give you an overview on how the Brazilian model of taking broadband to the further parts of the country is working. Next, please. So, Telebras was founded in 1972 and as a holding of 27 regional carriers and a long-distance carrier called Embratel, and also was responsible for 95% of the public telecommunication services in Brazil. And Telebras also had a research and development center called the Telebras R&D, where I began my career in R&D and digital switching. So during a lot of years, Telebras has done a very good work, but the problems that we faced in the end of the 80s and the beginning of the 90s, the government decided to privatize the system. So the Telebras was grouped in 4 different regions and sold to the international actions in a privatization process. At the same time, it was created a regulatory agency called Anatel. So the establishment of Anatel was part of the request of the Brazilian industry, which began with the constitutional amendment of 1995 that eliminated the government monopoly and allowed privatization and competition. But was a gap in this, and what happens that broadband services were not not regulatory frame. So what happens that we advance a lot in cellular phones. For instance, the Brazilian industry of cellular has today more 200 million users, which means that we have a density more than 100%. But in case of the broadband, we had a lot of problems. So as you can see here, for instance, in relate on density, you can see here that we have along inequalities, the south and southeast states of Brazil, where we have the richest part and the more density part of the country, we have a reasonable density. This was the figure in 2009. But in regions in north and northeast was really a shame, the density that we have, up to 1.5%. So that's one reason. The other one was how this market was distributed. And the market was distributed mainly in 91% in 5 big carriers. And these big operators in general, they are concentrated in south or southeast, where it is more cost effective to attend the broadband services. So another problem is that the speed offered. The speed offered was really very, very low. It's growing, as you can see in this figure, but it's still low. So we have now in the running to have at least 2 megabits per second in each connection. That's our goal. And then the government decided to interview in the market in 2009. This interview is the plan called PNBL, which the main objectives of this plan were to increase the speed, decrease the price, increase the coverage and penetration, expand the e-government, encourage the competition, and increase the service offering. And of course, one of the main objectives of the government policy is to increase the national technological autonomy and competitiveness. So that's the foundations of the plan. So the plan has basically 4 foundations, 4 pillars. One is related on regulatory and infrastructure. So we have, you can see, a lot of regulation. We have a new regulation frame. As I said before, broadband is not regulated, but the government and Anatel are creating some requirements for the incumbents and also some requirements for the small companies where to ease the entrance in the market and to increase the density. Another thing that's very important, I think, is related on infrastructure. So we have in Brazil, I think it's a culture, the culture of ownership. So it's very difficult to unbundle our network. So what we have, the government is creating some rules where there is a privilege for the companies that have some kind of sharing of their network. So we have recently, I will talk more about this, new rules for innovation and to develop new infrastructure, and this is privileging the share of infrastructure. Another very important thing that the government is doing is create some conditions where we can use, in the better terms, the licensing, for instance, for towers in the municipalities, which is in Brazil, is a municipal law. So you have different laws in different cities, and this is really very difficult for the operators to work. And now we have creating a national, a national role for that everybody has to enter in. And also it's important for us to create some tax incentives. So recently, last week, the government issued a rule called a special program of PNBL, where we have, until 2016, all the projects deployed in the country, we have no federal taxes. And the government is negotiating with the state that will have a reduction in terms of taxes for these projects, because there's a lot of different fields. For instance, since LTE to metropolitan areas to OPGW and so on. So the proposal is that to accelerate all this, create and deployment of new infrastructures. Another very important issue that we are developing is called the productive and technological policy. So the government issue also a bill where the products developed and manufactured in Brazil have preference in the purchase power of the government companies. So what's happening is that Telebras is one of the first, the pioneering this use of this rule. Of course, there is we cannot pay the price that the Brazilian companies are asking to us. So we had to negotiate a lot with them to reduce the price, because at maximum, the price acceptable is 10% of the minimum price offered in auctions. So that's a big opportunity that I invited our fellows here that are from private companies, the vendors, to go to Brazil to establish there in the next few years, because I think there is a big opportunity there. And it's important to say in this case that we don't have any differentiation in terms of capital. All companies established legally in Brazil are considered Brazilian companies. So what we are doing is to make a differentiation in terms of manufacturing in the country and development of technology in the country. So that's the preference that we have to do. And as I said, this program that we are now starting in the country, the operating companies has the obligation at least to use 20% of products developed in Brazil. And the fourth pillar of this project is to develop a national broadband focused in wholesale network, market based on existing oil, gas and oil, and electricity, fiber optics, dark fiber in general. So that was the beginning of Telebras. So let me talk about a little bit the beginning of Telebras. I entered in the company in September 2010. In September 2010, we received a big check from the government, a presidential bill, stating that they have the right to use dark fibers from Petrobras and Eletrobras, our energy sisters, and so on. So we started in a small office with no more than 30 people, I think, and then in 1 or 2 more months, we moved to a bigger office where we are now, and that's it. So we had to negotiate. First of all, to negotiate the dark fibers with our sister companies. And our sister companies are not exactly small companies. They are huge companies. No? Eletrobras and Petrobras are huge companies, and it was a very exciting experience to negotiate with them. Because first of all, what's the price of dark fiber? In Brazil, as I told you before, there is no dark fiber market. So we have to discuss with them which price to pay for the dark fiber. That was an interesting experience that I think that took about 3 or 4 months in discussion. In parallel with this, we were working in the network itself, the project of the planning and the project of the network itself. So we decided from the beginning that we have a DWDM IP MPLS network, and that's it. So another question that we have to discuss in the beginning was what kind of service to offer, because the presidential bill had a statement that Telebras could go to the last mile when necessary. But we think the beginning that last mile is a way that there is no return. So when you enter in the last mile, you were no more a wholesale company, you are a retail company. So the kind of investment that you have is 10 times more, at least. So we received a lot of pressure, but we decided to stay in the wholesale market. So we developed our business model based on this. That's the business model. So we are deploying the backbone, we are deploying backhaul, and the last mile, we are partnership with today more than 3,000 small, medium ISPs that are scattered in Brazil. And in general, we're receiving or buying services from the big operators, which means that they were, or they are, still are in some cases, sleeping with the competitor. So the big incumbents know what exactly where the big markets, based on this information they receive the ISP. So a lot of ISPs are migrating to our network because this is a dangerous way to make business, because in some cases they had the market from night to day. The big company goes to the one small, medium city where the market is very good and take the company, the small, medium company, out of the business. So that's why we decide to go to the market with these small and medium companies. Today we have more than 1,000 small and medium ISPs working with us, preparing or launching the services or launching the services right now. That's for record. Today, I think we have more than 200 works in progress in backhauls in the country. So another important thing is we define a standard price and a standard services. The services is called popular internet, has 1 megabit, and the price is about $17 a month with taxes. So what happens that in the first year was a big success, but as I showed. But now we have to move more, because the people that started 1 megabit now, 1 megabit for video is nothing. So we are moving for the popular with the same price for 2 megabits, which is a big challenge. But anyway, other very important work that we are done is to integrate networks, which means that we have in the country several state-owned or foundations, so on, in municipalities of small, medium networks, in general fiber networks. So we are integrating all these networks in Telebras network. For instance, it's interesting. One city, the company of the municipality developed software as a services for medical consultants, medical schedule. And they are now selling these services all over the country for other municipalities using the Telebras network. So that's one big opportunity that we are creating for this small and medium and regional companies. So also we have a lot of cost reduction in telecommunication services that they have now using our network. So they are improving, as an example that I told you, the public administration. And we are encouraging the e-government and all. So the Brazilian government has a program of e-government, and this program is starting to run in our network. And also with this, it's kind of agreements that we are doing, we are increasing our backbone. So what happens that from the planned backbone that we planned in 2010, we have several branches we're not planning that were integrated right now. And also we are doing another interesting thing, which is sharing infrastructure. So we have done a lot of swaps, dark fiber swaps with other companies, state-owned or private companies. And we are supporting digital inclusion programs that a lot of municipalities in Brazil have. And another Brazilian program is called Digital Cities. We are the prime supplier of internet access for these projects. We started last year with 8 cities, and this year we are moving more 300 cities. All these projects are supported by the Brazilian government. So the cities apply for the program in a very similar way that I think the Google is done here in the US. So they have to submit a process, to submit a project. There is a kind of judgment, and the government gives the money to these companies to deploy the network and to connect the Telebras network. So that's our planned network.
As I told you, we receive a big check, we receive initial project plan, and we had to develop this from the scratch to the field. And this is the big challenge that we faced in Telebras. So the network Planet has more than 2,000 miles, 20,000 miles, I'm sorry. And we received initially resources for 1 billion reais, which means about $500 million that we are now applying the network. And the Planet network, the terrestrial, is to coverage of 76% of municipalities and 88% of the population. That's our big objective. So, and we are moving, but we are moving with a lot of difficulties, a lot of challenges. I would like to address some challenges of this. But before, very rapidly, this is our logical network. As I told you before, is an ISP, an IP-MPLS network based on DWDM. And we, in our backhaul plans and backhaul deployment, we are, when possible, we are using fiber optics. And the reason is that we don't need to present for our shareholders, because Telebras is not a closed company. We are listed in Bovespa. But anyway, the government has more than 80% of the company. And our policy is a long-term policy, which means that we prefer to invest in fiber optics, which is in short term is not profitable, but in future terms, I think that this will be the future-proof network. It means that we are prepared for gigabytes, for 100 gigabytes, or 1 terabyte, and so on, and to enter in the backhaul. So we are heavily investing in backhauls with fiber optic, which means that we are having problems in the country with shortage of fiber optics. So I'm inviting you to go to Brazil because the market for fiber optic in the next few years will be huge. Let's start with our challenges. So, and we have challenges that are familiar to you, if you have operators here, I think so but we have to consider that Brazil is a country the same size of US, but not with the same infrastructure, and very different conditions of climate conditions. For instance, we have the Amazon forest, we have the south is different, we have the northeast is different. So we have different countries in the same country like you have here. So the first, not the first, but one of the main challenges that you have is with a very small team. Telebras has no more than 200 people right now. We started the project management. So from the beginning, we learned that the main problem that we have should be to have a good risk management system, because all the challenges that are posted, you had to control, to try to control. And we had a lot of this, for instance, in some places where you had a point of presence of our backbone, nothing was there. No energy, which is ironic, no energy, no real estate, nothing. So we have to create all the conditions. And we had also, for this reason, to have optimization of our resources, which means that we had to prioritize which project we are doing first and which project we are not doing. The second was the professional training, which means that we receive some professionals from the old Telebras with the culture of the holding company, and a lot of them with the culture of the agent, the Anatel, our regulatory agency. And at the same time, we received also, I think, 50% of our people came from the market. So it's different cultures in the same companies, and we have to mix all these cultures, and at the same time, we have to develop the project. So another thing is that the optimization of the CapEx. As I told you, we receive a big check, but this big check we have to manage well because the resources from the government we don't have all the resources that we need. So we have to improvement in our investments. So we have the efficient allocation of this CapEx and, as I told you, to prioritize the investment. Other very challenging business that you have with partnerships. So as I told you before, we integrated networks and we made a lot of swaps, but we had to manage all these agreements because as a state-owned company, we are in the worst of two worlds. We are controlled by the market. The stock market is Bovespa, which means that because you are an open company, and at the same time, we are controlled by the government. So, and the government in Brazil has a lot of accounting as organs or accounting system where you have to address. So that's why we have to make very careful with these partnerships, and also we had to have very careful with the partnership with our vendors, because we ask them to have a lot of speed in the deployment, but at the same time you have rules to obey, which is difficult to manage. And another part was the restructuring of the company. As I told you before, the company was a holding company, it's not an operator. And today, Telebras received a license called SCM, which means it's a multimedia service provider. We can provide all service except voice, because voice is a regulated matter. So we had a lot of, we are now in process of implement a lot of new process as an operating company, and also we are integrating an IT system, an ERP system with CRM system to improve the development of the company. Other challenge that we faced was first the network infrastructure. This is really a nightmare in Brazil, depending on where you are. That's the reason why in South and Southeast has a lot of density compared with North and Northeast, because in South and Southeast is easier to deploy networks. It's cheaper than in North and Northeast. So we developed a public policy, we have to go where the other companies are not going, mainly in North and Northeast. So it's a daily basis challenge that we have to integrate our network, to get real estate and electrical power. It's really, we are now in the process of the network for FIFA World Cup. I will talk after, and this is really tough to manage this network infrastructure conditions. I think licensing everybody has the same problem, so that I not mention here because it's a nightmare of all operating companies and all over the world. And then optical fiber was a problem too, a challenge, because we received different dark fibers with different quality. So we had a project, an ideal project. When we went to the real world, we have to reproject in some parts of our network, depending on the quality of the fiber optic that we receive, not only from our sister, but also from swap that we are making a lot of other companies. Logistics is really a challenge in Brazil because the size of the country and the different networks and so on is really tough to deploy a big network as we are deploying in the country, and the problem of logistics. And we had a lot of skeletons in the closet that we received from the old Telebras. So we have to have a daily basis again to manage the legal and our financial risks, because we receive a lot of lawsuits from old shareholders, from old partners, and so we were managing everything at the same time. So as I told you, that's one of the most challenging project that we have. This is considered by the government our strategic plan. Our strategic project is related to the North region. I invited you, I think that the Discovery Channel prepared a very interesting program. I think we will launch in the next, I think the beginning of April, related on the construction of the one line between, let me show you here.
This is Tucuruí, where we have a lot of a big electrical power system, and they are construction, a big construction here to Manaus, and at the same time to Macapá. The crossing of the Amazon River here is a big challenge because they had to develop 2 towers with the same height of the Eiffel Towers, about 340 meters each one. It's a really big challenge of civil engineering. And I think that I was looking for it yesterday, but I think in the next feature, I think it's a very interesting documentary of Discovery Channel based on this. So here we have a lot of challenges in terms of logistics, in terms of the Amazon forest, in terms of licensing, and so on. But we're moving the project, and because this is one of the strategic projects of our government. So another of our duties is related on FIFA World Cup. So Brazil has to provide a network with 4 nines of availability. And this is one nightmare for us. So now we are doubling all our redundant, and we are making a redundant network with a dual approach in each one of the stadium and the FIFA International Broadcast Center. So we are now moving this project. We are finalizing the 6 first cities for the Confederation Cups, which will be next June. And this is part of our day-by-day challenge to finalize the network to attend this. Other project is important for the government with the Telebras involvement is related projects of universities. So we are now improving the network of our research network in the country. So we are providing at least 1 gigabit for more than 400 federal universities, and another at least 200 or 400 megabits in over all 300 federal called community college here, but this is an isolated campi from federal universities. Other strategic project that we are developing, I would like to just to remark that Telebras has started the work in September 2000, so we have 2.5 years of activities, and that's the project. It's a geostationary satellite. So for this satellite, what's the main objective of this satellite is to provide coverage in Ka band where there is no possibility of coverage with terrestrial network, mainly in the Amazon, as I told you before, in the Amazon area and the frontiers of the country, where we have another project with the Brazilian Defense Ministry. And also, we provide the federal government strategic communication with this satellite, with a backup of all the federal government strategic communications. For this, Telebras and Embraer, we create a joint venture called Visiona. Visiona is being charged of the purchase of the first satellite. We are now in the process of RFP, request for proposals. The proposals are coming, I think, next April, and we will select. We expect to sign this contract by June or July. So, and the launching, I think, is in 30 to 36 months. So this is another step that they are moving in terms of strategic projects of Brazilian government. So I would like to show you some results that we have done. The first one is the construction of the network. So as today, we have this that you can see here in green is the network in operation. It's not very easy, but this is, we are operating right now. The blue is the deployment, we are done now. And the project we are done is in yellow. And the planning is in red. So as you can see from the first figure, we have a lot of improvements of the network, because to improve the network availability, to have a more meshed network, and also to improve the coverage. And also we start to make connections with some of our neighbors here in Argentina and Paraguay, and here Argentina and Uruguay. We are connecting now in April, the first international terrestrial connection. So that was the big challenge that we faced, but we have also some results. For instance, the wholesale price decrease. And I can tell you that I have some, not exactly, I'm not very welcome for the big operators in Brazil, because since Telebras entered in the market, the wholesale prices drop exponentially. So you can see that at least in South, we have price reduction of more than 50%. In Southeast, 30%. And North, approximately 40%. And Northeast, we have about approximately 50%. And Midwest, approximately 25%. Which means that the operators and the broadband business, they had a lot of fat to burn, and they are burning now. So that's why they are not very happy with us. But this is our role in this process in Brazil, because decrease the price in wholesale is as a consequence of decrease the price for the end user. Other very important issue that we are driving is related on the speed. So the speed is growing very fast, and the speed over 2 megabits is now representing about 40% of the speed, the average speed in the country. So our objective, as I said before, is to get in 2014 at least 2 megabits in the speed. And the speeds for 34 megabits, which are another standard of the market now, and 10 megabits, are a lot of offering in Brazil for very, very low prices. For instance, you can have a triple play and with 10 megabits internet and for, I think, $50 in the country today with taxes. So, other result that was to measure how the increase of the PNBL products at the popular internet get in the market. So the measure that we have from Anatel is in 1 year, from 2010 to 2011. Probably it happens the same between 2011 and 2012, which had approximately 1/3 of the new subscribers that enter in the market are in popular internet, which is very good for us, because it proves that our program is a success. Thank you very much for your attention.